The United Nations General Assembly Hall buzzed with anticipation on September 23, 2025. The iconic building, standing tall in the heart of New York City, was surrounded by a flurry of activity, diplomatic vehicles arriving, security teams on high alert, and journalists from every corner of the globe setting up their cameras. Inside, the air was thick with expectation, as if everyone present sensed that history was about to be made. Every seat was filled, diplomats murmuring in dozens of languages, all eyes fixed on the iconic podium. The hum of conversation was a tapestry of accents and dialects, reflecting the diversity and complexity of the world outside these walls. Some delegates exchanged nervous glances, while others whispered last-minute strategies or predictions about what was to come. The world's most powerful leaders sat behind their country's placards, faces tense with curiosity and concern. Heads of state and government ministers, many of whom had traveled thousands of miles, were united by a single question: how would today's events shape the future of international relations? This was no ordinary gathering. The return of President Donald Trump to the world stage had electrified global politics. The media frenzy outside was matched only by the intensity inside, as rumors swirled about the tone and content of Trump's much-anticipated address. Security was tighter than ever, with extra checkpoints and a visible police presence both inside and outside the building. Months of speculation had led to this moment. What would Trump say, and how would he say it? Journalists scribbled notes, analysts whispered into microphones, and social media buzzed with theories and predictions. The world was watching, and the stakes felt impossibly high. The president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, opened the session. His remarks met with polite applause. His speech, focused on unity and the urgent need for global cooperation, set a hopeful tone, but everyone knew the main event was yet to come. As Lula finished, a hush fell over the chamber. The energy shifted palpably, as if the entire room was collectively holding its breath, waiting for the next act in this unfolding drama. The clicking of cameras was the only sound as the President of the General Assembly announced the next speaker. Flashes lit up the hall, capturing the tension and anticipation etched on every face. Leaders leaned forward, bracing for what was to come. Some adjusted their earpieces, ready to catch every word, while others simply stared ahead, their expressions unreadable. President Trump strode to the podium, his confidence unmistakable. His presence commanded attention, and even his critics could not deny the impact he had on the room. For many, this speech was a potential turning point, one that could redefine alliances and challenge the very purpose of the UN. Around the world, televisions flickered with live coverage, and millions waited to see if Trump would double down on his America First rhetoric or offer a new vision for global cooperation. The ideals of cooperation and multilateralism hung in the balance against Trump's America First doctrine. Would the world move closer together, or would new divisions emerge from this pivotal moment? The world held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. In that charged silence, the future of international diplomacy seemed to hang by a thread, suspended between hope and uncertainty. The UN General Assembly is the world's annual town square where every nation, big or small, has a voice. Since 1952, it's been the one place where global priorities are set and leaders address each other directly. The general debate is more than speeches, it's where deals are struck and alliances are tested. This year's theme, Better Together, underscored the need for unity amid crisis. The US, as host and superpower, always commands attention, but Trump's return made this year's address pivotal. With wars raging and global anxieties high, the world looked to the US for leadership, or disruption. Some hoped for unity, others braced for confrontation. The stage was set for a verdict on the future of global cooperation. President Trump opened his address with a chilling warning that immediately set the tone for the entire assembly. There was no attempt to ease into the conversation or offer diplomatic pleasantries. Instead, he confronted the world's most pressing danger head-on, making it clear that the stakes had never been higher. He declared that nuclear weapons remain the single greatest threat to humanity's survival, a shadow looming over every nation regardless of borders or alliances. The destructive power of these arsenals, he warned, could erase centuries of progress in an instant. Skipping any formalities, Trump stated bluntly, "If those weapons are ever used, the world might come to an end." His words echoed through the vast hall, a stark reminder of the catastrophic consequences that would follow even a single nuclear detonation. The hall fell into a heavy silence. leaders from every corner of the globe sat in uneasy stillness, reminded that their debates and disagreements would be rendered meaningless in the face of nuclear war. The gravity of the moment was unmistakable. Trump's tone was grave, his words stripped of any diplomatic niceties. He spoke not as a politician seeking applause, but as a messenger delivering a dire warning to all of humanity. Shifting focus, he then addressed the threat of biological catastrophe. Referencing the COVID-19 pandemic, Trump called for an immediate halt to risky overseas experiments, particularly those involving dangerous pathogens, an unmistakable jab at China and its research practices. He demanded urgent, coordinated global action to prevent another devastating pandemic, urging nations to put aside their differences and work together for the sake of humanity's future. The world, he insisted, could not afford another disaster on the scale of COVID-19. This was not a call for traditional disarmament or vague promises. Instead, it was a blunt, unvarnished warning about the catastrophic stakes of inaction and complacency. Trump positioned himself as the only leader willing to confront these existential dangers directly, refusing to sugarcoat the risks or hide behind diplomatic language. His opening remarks reframed the entire debate at the United Nations. Survival must come first, politics and rivalries second. The fate of the world, he implied, depended on the choices made in that very room. The message was unmistakable. Complacency in the face of such threats could prove fatal, not just for nations but for civilization itself. The world was on notice. Trump then turned to migration, accusing the UN of fueling crises by supporting migrant flows into Western nations. He claimed the UN was undermining national sovereignty, a charge that stunned the chamber. "Your countries are being ruined," he warned, framing migration as an existential threat, not a humanitarian challenge. Trump urged leaders to reject globalist migration policies and adopt hardline measures like his own. He touted mass detentions and swift deportations as common sense, not controversy. The message, protect your borders or lose your nation. For supporters, it was a defense of sovereignty. For critics, an attack on human rights. Trump drew a sharp line: nationalism versus globalism. The UN's role in migration was not just questioned but delegitimized. Trump's next target was climate change and green energy. He dismissed climate science as the greatest con job ever, drawing gasps from vulnerable nations. He urged countries to abandon green initiatives, calling them a scam that would cripple economies and leave people in hardship. Trump championed fossil fuels as the path to prosperity, touting deregulation and energy dominance. He framed renewables as a threat, not a solution. This was a direct rebuke to the UN's climate agenda and the Paris Accord. For many, it was a declaration of war on decades of environmental progress. Trump sought to turn climate policy into a battle between elites and common sense. Trump then turned his attention to the ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza, using the global stage to sharply criticize both the United Nations and America's traditional allies. He accused international institutions of failing to prevent conflict and protect innocent lives, arguing that their inaction had only prolonged suffering and instability. On Ukraine, Trump singled out European nations for what he called blatant hypocrisy, condemning Russia's invasion while continuing to buy Russian energy. He argued that this double standard undermined the effectiveness of sanctions and sent mixed signals to Moscow, making the West look weak and divided. Trump insisted that only he possessed the negotiating skills to bring about a real peace deal, dismissing current diplomatic efforts as ineffective and lacking resolve. He claimed that under his leadership, the conflict would have been avoided or swiftly resolved, and he promised to end the war if given another chance. Turning to Gaza, Trump condemned the UN's repeated failures to broker a ceasefire or secure the release of Israeli hostages. He accused the organization of issuing endless statements while real people continued to suffer, and he questioned its ability to act decisively in moments of crisis. He demanded immediate, concrete action rather than more symbolic resolutions, declaring that the release of hostages must be the first, non-negotiable step toward any peace process. Anything less, he argued, would be a betrayal of basic human decency. Throughout his speech, Trump painted the UN as ineffective and America's allies as overly reliant on U.S. leadership, unwilling to take bold action on their own. He portrayed them as hesitant and indecisive in the face of global threats. His message was clear: alliances and partnerships only matter if they directly serve American interests. He warned that the U.S. would no longer shoulder the burden for others without clear benefits in return. Trump argued that multilateralism, once seen as a path to peace, had become an obstacle, slowing down decisions and diluting American power on the world stage. As his speech ended, many allies left the hall feeling isolated, uncertain about the future of international cooperation, and worried about America's shifting priorities. The message was unmistakable. America First was back, louder and more uncompromising than ever, signaling a new era of U.S. foreign policy on the world stage. Trump's most incendiary remarks came on the recognition of Palestine. As U.S. allies recognized Palestinian statehood, Trump called it a reward for terror, directly linking it to Hamas's actions. He accused allies of betraying Israel and abandoning moral principles. The condemnation was public and personal, shaming close partners on the world stage. Trump demanded the unconditional release of Israeli hostages before any political progress. This stance clashed with Europe's push for a two-state solution. The U.S. found itself isolated, deepening rifts within the Western alliance. Trump's rhetoric turned a policy dispute into a moral confrontation. As Trump left the podium, the General Assembly was silent. No applause, just shock. The thin, scattered clapping spoke volumes. Diplomats described the speech as a wrecking ball, an assault on the international system. European leaders scrambled to reaffirm their commitments to climate action and a two-state solution. Leaders from vulnerable nations called Trump's climate stance a death sentence. Latin American delegates saw his migration rhetoric as a rejection of shared responsibility. Even some allies were dismayed by the undiplomatic tone, fearing the UN's legitimacy was under attack. Nationalist leaders quietly praised Trump's candor, but support was muted. The overwhelming response alarmed and uncertainty. Trump's speech drew battle lines, leaving the world more divided than before. Trump's 2025 address was a seismic event, deepening global divides and shaking the UN's foundations. The speech didn't create new problems, but it inflamed old ones, widening rifts between the US and its allies, and eroding trust in multilateralism. The UN's future now hangs in the balance. Trump's attacks challenge the very premise of global cooperation. Nations must now choose to defend the multilateral system, or embrace nationalism and go it alone. Some may align with the US, others may seek independence from American leadership. The world faces a fork in the road, unity or fragmentation. The answer will define global politics for decades to come.